Hi, my name is Andrea Moretti. I'm a developer, a photographer, a traveler, and I'm definitely in love with the open source movement. With this video course, I'd like to introduce you Zurb Foundation, a wonderful framework that will help you build some nice and fully responsive websites with almost no effort. I promise. In this video, I want you to fully understand what a framework is and why you will fall in love with it. Essentially, a framework is a predefined set of tools, libraries, and best practices to realize something. Speaking of websites, it usually means to have CSS and JavaScript libraries which simplify and speed up the development process. In other words, using a framework such as Zurb Foundation or Twitter Bootstrap allows us to quickly produce a working responsive prototype without having to worry about compatibility issues, nor having to reinvent the wheel in order to have a solid starting backbone to work with. Probably the most basic web framework out there is HTML5 boilerplate. This project is very interesting to understand the usefulness of frameworks. In fact, it is just used to obtain a totally empty blank page to start with and nothing more. While it seems to be a silly task, in reality it is quite hard, and the effort and code required behind this project is really huge. If we need all this work to have a blank page that will behave nicely on all browsers and platforms, it is clear that when things get complex, it becomes almost impossible to get the job done without these opinionated frameworks and boilerplates. The most diffused frameworks out there are Twitter Bootstrap and Zurb Foundation, but there are lots more. The best way to see what these frameworks looks like, let's take a quick look to their homepage. During this video course, we'll see how to realize a website using Zurb Foundation. However, it won't be difficult to adapt the things you learn here to other frameworks as well. In the next video, we'll see how to set up our perfect working environment. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody. In the last video, we've seen how wonderful and useful frameworks are. However, they'll be almost useless if you keep coding with Microsoft Notepad. Frameworks and libraries are great, but they're not the only way to speed up the development process. It is really important to build up and customize a nice working environment. On modern web development, it usually means to choose a code editor, a web browser, and probably some command line automation tools. A serious code editor with at least syntax highlighting and code completion will surely speed up your work. If you feel adventurous, I strongly advise you to try out Emacs or Vim. However, there are a lot of user-friendly alternatives such as Sublime Text, Atom, Brackets, and Lighttable. For a newcomer, I'd suggest you to try out Sublime Text, but feel free to try all of them out and stick with the one you feel more comfortable. The best browsers out there are Chrome and Firefox. However, if you have Windows, keep Internet Explorer installed as well to check for code incompatibilities and be ready to cry a lot. You may also want to take a look at the tools on modern.ie or set up some virtual machines for serious testing. It will be much easier and pleasant to develop on a Linux box or with a Mac, while on Windows it could be a bit trickier to get some nice CLI utilities to work properly. Namely, you may want to try Git for Windows or Cygwin. By the way, the first things to install are Git, Node.js with its npm package system, and Ruby with Gem. This way, we'll be able to install and use automation tools such as Gulp and Grunt, preprocessors like SAS and Less, Beautify, linters, the Foundation helper itself, and much more in the future. On Linux, you probably do not need to download those tools from their websites, but you can simply install them with your official package manager such as apt-get, yum, pacman, emerge, depending on your distribution. On Mac, I strongly suggest you to install Homebrew and use it as a package manager. On Windows, you will probably have to download the installers from their official websites. So, in order to proceed to the next video and start to code, please be sure to install at least a code editor, a modern browser, Git, Node.js with npm, and Ruby with Gem. I hope to see you again in the next video, where we'll learn how to install Zurb Foundation and start hacking with it. Thanks for watching. Welcome back everybody. In our last video, we nicely crafted our working environment. Now it's time to spice it up a bit with a framework. In this video, we'll see how to download Zurb Foundation and how to start hacking with it. This is Foundation's homepage with its funny Yeti astronauts and a big download button that we are now going to click. We are presented with various options. To download the complete framework, an essential lightweight version with only the core elements, or we can also make a custom build with only the components that we require. Finally, we can install Foundation using Sass as well. In this video, we'll try out the complete edition, but in the next video we'll see how to use Sass, which in my humble opinion is the preferred way to go on real-world projects, and the one we are going to use in the rest of the course. Let's proceed. Click here to download the file and save it. Now, unzip our freshly downloaded bundle. Usually, they ship the package without a root folder, so be careful when decompressing. Always specify an empty output there, or it will place the files around in your actual working directory. Now, let's open the index file in our browser. Then, let's open index.html with our text editor to see how does it look. Here we have a lot of code, and in the next set of sections we'll see how it is structured and how does it work. Now, just for fun, let's try to change the class of this column in order to reduce its width to the half of the page. We just need to change it from large 12 to large 6, where those numbers represent how many columns to occupy. Now save the file and refresh the browser. Wonderful! We have halved our column. In this video we have learned how to download a working copy of the basic Foundation framework. In the next video we'll discover the magic of Sass. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. As I've stated in the previous video, before we proceed with the creation of our new website using Foundation, I would like to introduce you to Sass. And don't worry, Sass is a very polite guy. Sass is a CSS preprocessor and is used by Zurb to write the Foundation framework. It will be possible to work only with CSS as we have seen in the previous video. However, I think that knowing and using Sass permits us to unleash the full power of this framework. To learn the basics of Sass, we'll use sassmeister.com, a website where we can write Sass code and see in real time how it will be translated in CSS. One thing that we can do with Sass that could not be possible with simple CSS is using variables. In Sass, variables are declared with a $sign prepending the variable's name. Let's see how to use them. Here we have defined the bgColor variable with a value red and assigned that value to the background color of the body element. As you can see in the CSS tab, it is strictly translated to the expected valid CSS code. This is very useful because you can use a variable in a lot of places, and if you need to change its value, you only have to do it once. Another feature that we are going to use extensively are the mixins. Essentially, they work like functions and return CSS code to be included inside other definitions. Let's try an example. Here we have defined a mixin named rounded, so that every time we need to add rounded corners to an element, we can just include it without having to worry about the vendor prefixes. These two features are the ones that we are going to use the most. but on the official guide you can find some other nice features that can help you write more flexible and pleasant code. I suggest you to try out all the examples on this page using Sass Meister to familiarize with the Sass syntax. Above all, partials and imports that permits you to split your code on different reusable parts, and the extend inheritance system that allows us to subclass an element as we do in object-oriented programming. In the next video, we'll set up our new website using the Sass version of Foundation, and we'll see how to automatically transform our Sass code in valid CSS while coding. Thanks for watching. After a brief introduction to Sass, we are finally ready to create our fresh new website using Zurb Foundation. Foundation provides us with a command line tool for quick project scaffolding. However, before proceeding, be sure to have installed Git, Node.js and Ruby. Copy-paste these commands on your terminal to install Bower, Grunt and Foundation. If on Linux they don't seem to work properly, you may need to put a sudo in front of these commands. On Windows, you will need to download Node and Ruby installer from their official websites, while to have Git and Bower working correctly, you can use Git for Windows. Now we are ready to create our project. Let's assume that we want to create a photography website and call it Foundography, or with a yet sillier name if you dare. Using libsass will make everything much faster, but we won't be able to use some bleeding-edge features of Sass. However, with Foundation we will not need them, so if you have no valid reason, my advice is to use libsass for speed's sake. Let's enter in the generated directory and see what is inside. Here we have our index file and, as usual, a JS and CSS directory. However, we should not touch the CSS, but only work on the SCSS directory, because Grunt will generate the CSS for us. We have two possibilities with Grunt. If we use the command grunt build, it will simply generate the CSS on demand, while if we use grunt watch, it will regenerate the CSS every time we change the SCSS file. Let's try this out. Let's start grunt watch and keep it running. If you open the index file on the browser, you will see our dear demo page. Now open the settings file inside the SCSS directory. Here we have a lot of options commented out. We can change the Foundation defaults by uncommenting them and changing their values. Let's try to change the primary color variable from blue to red. Now save the file and refresh the browser. As you can see, the CSS was automatically recompiled and the primary color was changed. We have learned how to use the official Foundation project scaffolder, and we finally got our website ready to be customized. In the next section, we'll talk about responsive design, and we'll see how to make our website look good on every device. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. In this section, we are going to learn about responsive design, why it is essential in modern web design, and how to implement it using Zurb Foundation. The first step is to define some breakpoints for our pages. Basically, we want to identify the different widths at which we need to make some changes in order to make our site adapt to smaller devices. That's not an easy task. In fact, smartphone screens are really variegated, and we usually have to consider some opinionated median approximation. With the advent of tablets, wearables, huge screen, and the continuing changes in their resolutions, I think the best thing to do is to rely on good standards, and also be sure that our design works well at the critical sizes near the breakpoints. To define those breakpoints, we need to rely on CSS media queries that fundamentally consists on the possibility to declare some conditional CSS depending on the screen's actual status. By default, Foundation comes with 5 media queries: small, medium, large, X large and XX large. For each of them, we can choose between the up or the only version. For example, medium up will apply to all screen sizes equal or bigger than medium, while medium only will apply only to the medium range. But let's try this out to make it clearer. Firstly, let's open our index file and be sure to have the ground task running in the background. Now erase everything but the first div that contains the title. Now change Welcome to Foundation with Welcome to Foundography and add an ID to the containing H1 element. Now assume that we want to invert the colors of the website on mobile and have a dark background with light text. Let's open the app.css file and define our small-only media query. Here, we want to change the entire body background and the welcome text color. Now save the file and open index.html on the browser. Here, you can see our stylish welcome text, black on white. As you can see, on mobile our website has a dark background and a light text. Cool, right? In this video, we learned about media queries. We can consider them as a low-level tool for responsive design. In fact, a lot of Foundation's features and components are abstracted over media queries. But we still are going to use them a bit in order to keep the presentation layer separated from the semantic one. In the next video, we'll talk about the grid system, which is the most useful tool to make our site responsive. In the previous video, we started to get acquainted with the media queries. In this video, we are going to talk about the grid system. Foundation by default uses a 12-column system, but if needed, you can eventually change it using SAS. The basic idea behind grid systems is to abstract CSS positioning and resizing of elements behind the concept of rows and columns. Basically, classes are provided to us so we can split each row in columns of various sizes. Our main motive here is to design a page thinking about how things have to fit inside this virtual grid, and we don't have to worry about how to achieve it with CSS. Now open our index file and let's see how this grid system works. As you can see, we already have a row element. Inside it, we have a column element that contains our welcome text. Declaring a column element is a bit tricky. We have to specify, using appropriate classes, how many of the 12 available columns the element is going to use on different devices. Here, for example, we have our text that will span over all the 12 columns on large screens, and it is conveniently expressed with the large 12 columns class. Now imagine that we want to add 4 square images below and that we want to show them in one line on a large screen, for example a PC, in 2 lines on a medium screen such as a tablet, and in 4 lines on a small screen like a mobile device. Firstly, add another row element below. Then let's create the 4 columns with a placeholder image inside. We now have to add the proper classes with some simple math. You can guess them, it's very easy. We need our 4 images to be 3 columns large on big screens, 6 columns on medium screens, and 12 on small screens. So we have to add large 3, medium 6, and small 12 classes. Now save the file and refresh the browser. As you can see, the images are now presented as expected. Grasping the grid system is a fundamental skill to correctly use a framework. In this video, we've seen that it's not that hard at all. In the next video, we are going to discover visibility classes, a very practical tool to dynamically hide or show elements on different screen sizes. Thanks for watching. Hi everybody. In the previous video, we learned about the grid system and set some classes in our index file to make it work nicely on mobile devices. Today, we'll talk about visibility classes. However, before moving on, I want you to make some changes to our work. Until now, we defined classes directly in the HTML file. This is easy and quick when prototyping, but when things get complicated, it could lead to a total mess. So, I would like to start using the Sass way. It is clean and elegant, and I'm sure you'll get used to it. Firstly, open our index file and remove all the classes. Now, let's add some more semantic class names to our elements. We'll call the first row header using an ID instead of classes because it will be unique. Then change the class of the contained column to welcome box. Now label the next row with the ID main and give all the images columns the class top image. Now everything has an ID or a class name that lets us understand what that element should be and not how it should look. However, to have back the proper behavior from those elements, we have to give them their old classes, but we are going to do it in the SCSS file using Sass mixins. Open the app SCSS file and create a selector for header and main ID. Then add the grid row mixin in it. Then let's add welcome box and top image classes and then add the grid column mixin on them, with 12 and 3 respectively as arguments. You've got it, they are column numbers. Now we have to rewrite the top image selector on different media queries to set it to 12 columns on small and 6 columns on medium. Done. It seems a lot of work, but in the long run it will result in a much more cleaner code. Also consider that now we can change the image's behavior without having to rewrite all the classes directly on them, but just changing it on the SCSS file. Today I'd like to show you another handy tool, visibility classes. Foundation provides us a bunch of classes to show or hide content depending on screen size, screen orientation, and touch availability. For example, let's try to hide our welcome box on mobile. We need to extend the hide for small only class. To note that we are using extend instead of include because the latter is only for mixins, and Foundation does not provide us a mixin for this task, but only classes that we can subclass with extend. If you now save and open the index file in the browser, our welcome text will disappear on small screens. Easy peasy. In next video, we'll see what does it really mean to go mobile first. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. We've just learned to use the grid system. Now it's time to understand more in depth what a mobile-first approach really is. In the previous video, we've made another error, and guess what? Now you're about to fix it. We started our design thinking first on how it should look on big screens. We wanted to see 4 images in a row, and on the SCSS file we set it as a default and worked on media queries to change it on smaller screen. The best approach, and the one suggested by Zurb itself, is to go on the opposite direction. Design for mobile first and then make it adapt to bigger screen. There are various reasons to go mobile first. I think the most important are that mobile is usually a critical scenario with size, speed, and data plans constraints. Designing for mobile is quite harder and needs special attention in these aspects. So, a web page optimized for a smartphone will have no problem when running on a big screen, and we can freely visually enrich it thanks to larger available space and speed. Another aspect to consider is that designing for mobile forces us to find out what are the most important elements and how to present them immediately using wisely the little space we have. This usually leads to better user interfaces, which means a better overall user experience. Now let's see how to fix our code. Firstly, our welcome box. We do not want to hide it for mobile only, we instead want to show it for medium up to bigger screens. It may sound exactly the same, and there will be no difference on the results. But conceptually, we are now starting to think mobile first. Now, imagining that we are on mobile, we want our top image to be 12 columns large and occupy the whole screen. Also put body and welcome colors out of small media queries. Ideally, a small media query should not exist at all, because what we want on mobile should be the default CSS. Then rewrite our announcements on the respective media queries. We have now refactored our code to be mobile first. Usually, it won't cost you any extra work if you think about it right at the beginning. So, try to always think using this perspective in the future. In the next video, we'll discover a hidden gem of Foundation, the interchange plugin. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. In the last video, we refactored our code to be mobile first and started to grasp the main concepts of that approach. Today we are going to talk about interchange. Sometimes we want to serve different resources depending on media queries. The most typical use is to serve smaller images for mobile, so that they will be downloaded and rendered faster with no visual quality loss. Foundation ships with a great JavaScript plugin named Interchange that permits us to achieve this task. Using data interchange attribute, we can specify what to load and when. Let's see how it works and what is the syntax to use. Imagine that we want a big banner just below our welcome text and we want to serve it with different sizes for the different media queries. Firstly, create a div inside the header and assign to it the top banner class. Then, in app CSS, let's specify that we want it to be 12 columns large. Now, in index.html, add an image element and write down the data interchange attribute this way. Essentially, we have to specify a list of different resources associated with different media queries. At the end, let's also add a horizontal line to separate the banner from the 4 images. As you can see, when we resize our window, the top banner changes its resolution as expected. The plugin itself is very smart. If we specify a data interchange attribute on an image, it will load different source image files. But we can also specify it for a div element, and in that case, if we pass an image file, it will set it as a background, while if we specify an HTML file, it will load its content inside the div. This way, we are allowed to do some really smart things, such as having completely different navigation code on mobile and on desktop. In Foundation's documentation, there's a really funny demo. Here, we have an interactive Google map, but if we shrink the screen to mobile size, we see a static image of the map, which is way faster to load on smartphones. Interchange is one of the smartest tools that makes Foundation great at responsive design, and I'm sure that you won't undervalue its potential. In the next section, we'll see how to create a great user interface to navigate our website. Thanks for watching. Hi everybody! In our previous section, you grasped the basics of responsive web design. In this section, we are going to realize a nice navigation system for our website, and with Foundation's tools, started to optimize your website. In this video, we are going to see how to implement an effective menu for your website. The first step is usually to add a main menu. However, thinking mobile first, today we are going to add an off-canvas menu. Off-canvas menus will appear on sites when you slide away the main content. You are used to them as they are featured on a lot of native mobile applications, so they are becoming a common choice for mobile website navigation. Realizing off-canvas with Zurb Foundation involves a bit of boilerplate, and seeing it yourself is quite easier than describing it. Basically, we need to wrap all of our content inside an off-canvas wrap and an inner wrap. Then, on top, we need to create a top bar containing the title and a menu icon. At this point, let's add the menu itself on the left side. Finally, we have to wrap our real page content inside the main section. You can now save and try it out live on your browser. As you can see, clicking the menu icon on the top left will trigger our navigation on the left side. On mobile devices, you can simply swipe to the right. In this case on desktop, we have a lot of space, and so we do not want an off-canvas navigation that could be some way counterintuitive outside of a mobile platform. So, we just need to hide our top bar for medium and up on our SCSS file. In this video, we have learned the basics implementation of off-canvas menus. You can refer the official docs for some advanced stylings and JavaScript functions. In the next video, we'll incorporate a classical top menu to navigate the site on larger screens. Thanks for watching. In our previous video, we've used the off-canvas to realize a nice menu for our mobile websites. However, it doesn't look so good on large screens, and we would eventually like to have a classic menu bar on top when on desktop. Foundation lets us create it quite easily. It's not that different from what we've seen building the off-canvas. Don't worry about remembering all the class names and the exact structure. I do not do it either, and the official docs will come to our rescue when needed. Also because in the future some changes could arise. Let's simply add our classic navigation on top of the off-canvas one. As you've noticed, I know you did, both our navigation bars have a title area and a section with a list of links. This pattern is quite common in Foundation. If you, as usual, save the file and refresh the browser, you'll see our nice main menu. However, we want it to disappear on mobile, so as to not have a double menu. To do so, let's specify on our style file that we want our desktop top bar to be shown only for medium and up. Great! Now it works as expected. However, on a very large screen, it looks quite unpleasant to have the title and the links to span far away to the very edge of the screen. It would be nicer to have them aligned with our main content. Foundation comes to our rescue here. We can wrap our desktop top bar inside a div with a contain to grid class. This way, our content will stay on the boundaries of the grid system and will be aligned with the rest of the page. Now it is way nicer. Contain to grid is not the only helper class we can use. We could also use the fixed class to keep the bar always present on top when scrolling, or make it sticky and glue it on top only when we reach the bar positioned somewhere on the content. As usual, for the details and particular usages, the documentation will help. In this video, we've learned how to build a top bar menu for our website. In the next video, we are going to glue up some sticky navs. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody. In our previous video, we've seen how to realize a classic top bar menu. The point we've reached so far might probably be enough for a lot of use cases. However, for didactic purposes, on the remaining video of this section, we'll try to explore some other navigation possibilities. The sticky navigation is becoming quite popular. Essentially, it is a normal menu bar that, when reached by scrolling, will stick itself on the top of the page and will permit you to jump to different anchors of your page. To try it out on our website, we could design a portfolio page with a sticky nav that allows us to jump to different photography categories. To create the portfolio page, we can just copy the index.html file and erase everything inside the main section. This way, we'll have our navigation available and a white canvas to design with. But we'll have to fix the links on all the pages when we have to change them. However, this is not how the real world works today. Usually, we will use some templating system to not repeat the common elements and to be able to edit them only once when needed. By the way, we'll do it the old way to not create confusion with external tools. If you are curious, as you should be, just get a look at simple PHP includes or way fancier JavaScript templating systems such as handlebars. When we have our new page and all the links working correctly, we can add our sticky nav just right into the main section, maybe wrapping everything inside a row to keep it aligned with the grid. Basically, we have to define some data attributes to let the JavaScript plugin work. Data magellan expedition equal fixed will tell Magellan, that is the name of the sticky navigation plugin in Foundation, to consider that element the actual sticky nav. Data magellan arrival tells the plugin to which anchor element the link should go. Finally, we have to tell Magellan what are the destination of his adventurous expeditions. We simply have to add the data magellan destination attribute to our anchors. As usual, save and reload our new portfolio page, so you can play with our brand new sticky navigation system. Actually, we are using a placeholder box instead of an actual gallery of images. But on section 5, we'll see how to deal with media elements more in depth. In this video, you've learned how to realize an effective scrolling navigation using Foundation's plugin. You can now add Magellan to your toolbox if this famous navigator's ship is going to fit inside. In our next video, we'll learn how to build some simple side menu. Thanks for watching. Hi there, everyone. In our last adventure, we were sailing the 7 seas with Magellan. In this voyage, we are going to see something quite simpler, but incredibly useful in a lot of situations: side navigation. In the old days of table and frame-based designs, we were used to big side menus on every web page. Today, web designers try to keep the user interface way lighter, but in many cases, an unobtrusive vertical list of links is still very helpful. Foundation provides us a nice, ready-to-go style for side navigations. Before continuing, I would like you to erase the SAS code that inverts the colors on mobile. It was nice as an example, but it's quite nasty and will eventually force us to redefine all the default colors of Foundation. To try out the side nav, say we want a service page divided in different sections and a side menu to jump to each one of them. Firstly, just create the page and add our content in simple HTML. As you have noticed, here we have used simple semantic names for our classes. In fact, here we don't have to deal with JavaScript plugins, and all the elements could be easily identified with meaningful names. However, to have the style to work, we have to edit those classes on the SCSS file. Firstly, let's define services as a row. Now let's define our navigation, as it will occupy 1/4 of the screen, but let it disappear on mobile. And now the magic. To make our menu look great, let's apply to it the Foundation mixin for side-nav. Remember that we are designing mobile first, so we want the service content to be 12 columns large by default, because on mobile we have no side navigation. By the way, we want it to be 9 columns on medium up to let the menu appear on its left. We'll need a media query, as you guessed. Finished! Our HTML code is very clean and all the styling and behavior is well organized on the style file. As usual, save and refresh to get a look at our wonderful service page. In this video, we learned how to use the side-nav mixin, but also we had a closer look on how to write semantic code in HTML and then style it with the magic of Sass. In the next video, drop-downs are waiting for us. Thanks for watching. Hi everybody! In our last video, we enjoyed the side-nav. Today, as anticipated, we are going to play with drop-downs. In Foundation 5, drop-downs has been removed from all the elements such as menu bar, but they are now standalone and could be integrated everywhere. We can attach a drop-down to buttons, texts, menus, almost everything. However, we have to be careful, because the parent style could eventually conflict with the drop-down style. To demonstrate the flexibility of Foundation's drop-downs, let's try to add another item to our desktop menu that will open a drop-down with some links to social networks profiles. Firstly, let's add the new element. With the data drop-down, we are defining the ID of the element that contains the actual HTML to be shown when we click on the link. Now we have to define the content. Here we have to add the data drop-down content to let the plugin work, and also add the f drop-down class to style it correctly. However, if you save and reload, you will notice that it looks quite ugly. The problem here is that the UL and LI elements here are child nodes of the top bar sections, so they are styled as if they are menu elements. A quick workaround might be to substitute the UL with a DL that is not already styled by the top bar. Now, if you reload, you'll see that it looks way nicer. However, it seems to need some padding. In fact, to properly render the DL element here, we have to consider the drop-down as a container for arbitrary HTML. Foundation provides us with the content class that realizes this exact behavior. Just add the content class to our DL and we'll be fine. Now it looks really good, doesn't it? On the official documentation, you will also find some advanced usage of top bar, such as the sticky bar, drop-down sub-navigation, and the search inputs. However, my advice is to try to keep the navigation as simple as possible in order to enhance the site usability. As homework, you'll have to implement our social drop-down on all the pages. Attaching a drop-down to buttons and simple text is easier. However, today I wanted to show you a more complicated example, hoping that it could help you when you need to deal with such kind of unwanted behavior. Moving away from framework's strict guidelines could be dangerous. However, as Foundation is very well structured, we can make it flexible enough with just some code smarts and a little effort. In the next section, we are going to explore some nice tools that Foundation gives us to style and structure the actual content of the web pages. Thanks for watching and see you soon! Welcome back everybody! In our last section, we have learned how to build a nice navigation system for our website. Now we are going to discover some elements and plugins to help give the actual content some structure. In this video you are going to see how to use tabs to define and navigate between sections of HTML on a single page. To try out tabs, let's create our contact page. Then we'll add to it a map and a placeholder for a contact form. First of all, as usual, create the contacts HTML page by copying another page and erasing everything inside the main section area. Tab syntax is not different from all the other menus with related content that we've made so far. We have a list on top with the links. Here we are trying to be as semantic as possible. However, because we are dealing with a JavaScript plugin, we need to specify some classes and attributes directly in the HTML code. Now let's create the tabs with the actual content. To make it fancy, we'll embed a Google map, while for the contact form we just put a placeholder, but we are going to implement it in section 6. Essentially, we need to have a menu list with the tabs class and the data tab attribute. Then, the tabs will have to be inserted in a div with the tabs content class. Each tab needs to have the tab class and the ID we linked to with the menu. Don't forget to edit our style file to make the contacts div 12 columns large too. Save and refresh and enjoy your contacts page. As you can see, clicking on the tabs switches between the two contents. In this case, we have no need to use some kind of responsive optimization. 2 or 3 tabs usually work quite nicely both on mobile and on desktop. In this video, you've learned everything about tabs. They can be very useful for internal navigations, mainly when you want the user not having to scroll around or when you're constrained in small spaces for your content. Now that you're a tab hero, I hope you will enjoy using them. However, try to resist the temptation to use them everywhere. In some situations they could be counterintuitive and possibly hide some key content at the first sight. In the next video we are going to talk about typography. See you soon! Here we are. In our last video, you played a bit with tabs. In this video, we are going to talk about beautiful typography and how Foundation defaults help us with it. Typography is often undervalued, but it is in fact a core design component. Poorly curated typography could severely compromise the look of a website, and reaching the perfect balance and proportions is not an easy task. Luckily, Foundation ships with pixel-perfect proportions for font sizes, margins, and spacings. To get a look on how typography looks on Foundation by default, the simpler thing to do is to create a page with some nice placeholder text. Let's create an About page and don't forget to wire it up on all the menus. There are various sites to generate some lorem ipsum text. Personally, I like loripsum.net as it allows us to include a lot of different HTML tags in the generated text. You should now be confident enough to create a wrapper div with section class and then modify the style to make it behave as a row. Well done! Now just copy the generated HTML and paste it inside our section div. Save and refresh and give a look. Everything looks well balanced and the whole page flows with a good rhythm. Usually, writing in plain HTML will give you such good results. However, on the official documentation, there are also some other nice classes to play with. Namely, subheaders, small sections, as well as different kind of lists, and some fancier stuff such as labels and keystrokes. Basically, on Foundation you won't have to care too much about typography, because it ships with nice defaults that automatically adapts to different screen sizes. If eventually you need to change the font's look, there is always size variables. I hope that today you've started to appreciate typography and understood its core role in the design process. In the next video, we are going to add some friendly pricing tables. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody. In our last video, you discovered the importance of typography and how Zurb Foundation helps dealing with it. In this video, we are going to be way more materialist. Websites often sell some kind of services or goods, and sooner or later, time will come to be paid for them. It's quite usual nowadays to see vertical pricing tables with some inviting action button at their bottom. This pattern is so diffused and recognized by the user that on Foundation they've decided to include a ready-to-use style class for them. We already have our services page that looks as a good fit for a pricing table. Let's say we want to show pricing for our advertising services. First of all, just remove the placeholder image. Then, let's add our pricing table. The markup already looks semantic enough to me. So, the only class I've added is standard, just to distinguish this table from others. Now you can copy the pricing table and add two more pricing options, Basic and Pro. If you now save and refresh, you will see that on mobile it works well. But maybe on a large screen it would be more pleasant to have the three pricing tables in a single line. Let's hack up SCSS to obtain this behavior. Here, on mobile, we want the pricing table to be full width, while on large screens we want it to be 1/3 of the row, that is, 4 columns. Now go back to the browser and check. Way better. It's never easy to tell the customers, okay, now it's time to pay. However, with a good-looking pricing table, we can try to relieve the pain. You can now pack pricing tables with all your other tools. In the next video, we'll see how to deal with more general tables. Thanks for watching. Hi there. In our last video, we used Foundation to create some nice-looking pricing tables for our services. In this video, I want to introduce you to another nice tool to organize your contents, accordions. No monkey is going to play them, and they won't produce any sound at all. However, you'll find them very useful when dealing with large contents and small spaces. Basically, accordions are a way to insert some sections of content that will be expanded when you click on the title, as well as hiding all the other sections. But let's try to create an accordion to see how does it really look. We can use our corporate service section and divide it on 3 subsections: headshots, groups, and industrial. We'll try to keep it semantic. However, we have to specify the data accordion attributes on the main definition list. Essentially, you have to build up a definition list where every element has a link with the title and a div with the content. You have to set the anchor to link to the content ID for each section. Nothing fancy here, just basic HTML with our own classes. Now we need to make it a real accordion with size. Just open the app SCSS and add those lines. Be careful, you have to nest the title and the content inside your main accordion. You cannot do nesting on regular CSS, but with SAS you can, and in this case you have to do it in order to have it working. Basically, it is as simple as adding three mixins: accordion container, accordion navigation, and accordion content. Nothing less, nothing more. If you now save and reload, you will enjoy our brand new accordion. In this video, you have learned how to create accordion in a semantic way. They could be very helpful when dealing with some complex content organization and are a great tool to know about. In the next video, we are going to fix that decent looking pricing table that we've just made into a very professional looking table with the help of the equalizer plugin. See you soon! Hi there everybody! In the last video, we used accordions to give some structure to our content. Today, I want to introduce you to a small but very handy Foundation plugin, Equalizer. This tool allows you to keep the height of some elements all the same, and it is very useful when you have to deal with different contents that need to be nicely aligned. Our pricing table is a classical example of those situations. As you can see, the basic pricing is smaller than the others, and it looks ugly as it doesn't have the same heights as the others. So, we need to call equalizer to our rescue. Basically, you only have to define what is the container of the elements to equalize, using the data equalizer attribute. Then, you simply have to mark each element with the data equalizer watch attribute. In our case, we just want every pricing table to have the same height. If you now save and reload the browser, you will notice that the heights are now equal, but that second button looks ugly. Hopefully, it should be aligned with the other buttons. This situation is quite common when using equalizer, so I'm going to teach you a trick to deal with it. Essentially, we have to identify what really are the elements that need to have the same height. In our case, we actually want the content before the buttons to be equalized. Then, the buttons won't need any special treatment, as we know that they all have the same size. So, we just need to enclose inside an equalized container the section of the pricing table which is affected by a variable size. In our case, everything before the button. Now our pricing table should look much better. In this video, you've learned how to use Equalizer, a little undervalued tool that sometimes can save your life during your design work. In the next section, we are going to deal with media content, and you'll see how Foundation helps you show images and videos on a responsive environment. Thanks for watching! Welcome back everybody! After the last section, you should now be quite fluent at adding and structuring some textual content to your website. However, we are building a photography website, so, arguably, images have to be first-class citizens. In this video, you'll learn to deal with media files and how to show them on mobile as well as desktop in the most pleasant and fastest way. Responsive design becomes harder when you have to incorporate some media content. In fact, there are a lot of factors to consider. The connection speed could be a bottleneck on mobile. Maintaining the correct proportions could be tricky when having to show the same content both on portrait and landscape mode. The list will go on and on and on. With the help of Zurb Foundation, we'll try to lessen the pain involved in such situations. Today, we are going to start on a simple topic, and you will create a rudimentary gallery of images using Foundation classes to properly render the thumbnails. You can use one of the sections of our portfolio page, let's say the portraits one. Firstly, we remove the placeholder images. Then we are going to add 8 image thumbs wrapped inside an anchor, as we are used to doing it with plain HTML. The links will take us to the big images, while on the gallery page we only have smaller clickable thumbnails. We now need to style the newly created portfolio thumbnail class using Sass. Before we go ahead, however, we should give each section an ID, so that in our style file we can then define each one as a separate row. Let's do it on app SCSS. Now let's add the rules for portfolio.thumbnails to make it 12 columns on small, 6 columns on medium, and 3 columns on large. We also have to include the thumb mixin to let Foundation style it. If you save and refresh, however, you will see that while the thumbnail box occupies the whole available space, the image, however, doesn't scale. A quick fix for this problem is to set thumbnail images min width to 100%. Now the images will adapt to the screen size correctly. In this video, you have created a basic responsive gallery for our portrait section. Sometimes, however, we do not want our images to be scaled in order to preserve their full quality. In such cases, one solution could be to keep the images on their real size and just evenly space them in the available space. In the next video, we'll see how to obtain this result using block grids. Thanks for watching. Hi there, everybody. In the previous video, you have created a gallery of images and made it responsive using rows and columns as usual. In some situations, however, we might want to have our elements to be evenly spaced instead of changing their size, and maybe to have full control on the number of elements to show for each media query. This could be particularly useful when you have a fixed number of elements to be differently disposed at various screen sizes. In this video, we are going to use block grids to create another gallery, but this time we want to have 2 rows of 3 evenly spaced images on large screens, while having 3 rows of 2 images on mobile. Let's modify the landscape section of our portfolio to try this out. As usual, erase the placeholder image. This time we are going to wrap the 6 images in an unordered list. Also note that this time we are going to use horizontal images, as we are supposed to showcase some landscape here, right? It's now time to do the block grid magic with SAS. On the style file, we have to use the block grid mixin over the wrapping unordered list. We are also using the thumb mixin to style the links of the landscape gallery, as we have already done with the portraits. The block grid mixin accepts one parameter, which indicates the number of elements that are comprised in one row. As usual, we just have to modify the mixin for the different media queries to get the expected responsive behavior. In this video, we were able to maintain size and proportions of a grid of images thanks to the block grid mixin included with Foundation. In the next video, we'll see how to deal with embeddable videos. See you soon! Welcome back. In the previous video, we played with block grids to distribute our contents in an evenly spaced grid. Today, you are going to see how to embed videos in your website and how to keep their size and proportions right in every device. Please add the video section to your portfolio. So, we'll see how to incorporate some videos using the Flex Video Mixin. Generally, it's a good idea to host our video using services like YouTube or Vimeo. They are the most diffuse and straightforward to use. So, we are going to see how to pick up a video from both the platforms and then embed it in our page. Let's start with YouTube. Open YouTube and search for a video you like. I'm going to use this funny parody of Star Wars new trailer. Now we need to get the code to embed this video on our website. Scroll a bit down and click on Share. Then select Embed. The highlighted code is the one you need to embed the video on your website. So copy it and paste it back in the newly created video section. This code should work well online. However, as we are developing on a local machine, we need to add HTTPS at the beginning of the source attribute. Great! Now let's do the same with a Vimeo video. Open Vimeo and search for another video you like. I'm going to use a nice short film by Corrado Bungaro. Now click on the aeroplane share icon right on the video. Copy the embed code and paste it right down your other video on the portfolio. If you now save and refresh, you will see that there are 2 videos embedded on your website. However, they do not look responsive at all. Here comes the magic of Foundation. Let's see how with Flex Video we can make every embedded video responsive. Firstly, we need to wrap the iframes inside a div. Let's assign it the video class too. Now we need to tell Foundation that we want a video class to represent Flex Video Container. So just add that mixin on the SAS file. Done! It was really that easy? Yes, and if you don't believe me, just save, refresh, and enjoy your awesome responsive videos. Today, you have deliberately borrowed 2 videos from YouTube and Vimeo without informing the owner, and the cops will soon knock at your door. However, they will be pleased by how the videos looks perfect on their phones thanks to Flex Video and Foundation. So, this time you're not going to be arrested. In the next video, we'll make a visit to an old friend, Interchange. Thanks for watching. Welcome back everybody. In the previous video, you gave a twist to your website by embedding some videos, and thanks to Flex Video, they look great both on your large screens as well as your smartphone. Today, we'll pay a visit to the Interchange plugin. Dealing with media files is one of the things it does better. We are now going to make some nice optimization to our galleries with the help of this great plugin. You are going to create another grid gallery for the still section. This time, however, we want 4 horizontal images and 4 vertical ones. But we would like the horizontal images to appear only when the device is horizontal or we are on a widescreen, also called landscape mode, whereas showing only verticals when we are in portrait mode. So, essentially, what we are going to do is displaying only 4 images and with the help of Interchange swap them when we are in portrait or landscape mode. To do so, we'll use Interchange to load different HTML files depending on media queries and using their content to populate an HTML container. However, in order to try it out on a local machine, we need to use a small web server, because for security reasons, the browser will block our attempt to load a local file using JavaScript. You can use whatever web server you like. To keep things simple, my advice is to install HTTP server with npm, as you have already installed Node. To install it, just write on your terminal npm install -g http server. Sudo may be needed on Unix. Now, if you call the HTTP server inside the website root directory, it will be served on localhost with port 8080. Here it is your website running on a local web server. From now on, we are always going to use the local server to view our website to have it working correctly. Now, the first thing to do is create an empty grid gallery on your still section. Using data interchange attribute, we now instruct the unordered list to load different contents for the 2 media queries. Now you need to create the 2 additional HTML files, Still Gallery Landscape and Still Gallery Portrait. In each of these files, you need to put the list items with the images, horizontal or vertical. You can just copy the structure from the landscape section. Just remember to use horizontal images on the landscape file and verticals on the portraits one. Now, if you save and refresh, it should work as expected, showing 4 vertical images on portrait mode and 4 horizontals on landscape. Today, you've learned to use interchange to load different HTML content depending on different media queries. There is no limit to its possible applications, and it gives us a great flexibility when searching for practical solutions for our responsive design. In the next video, we'll try out the slider and lightbox plugin that ships with Foundation. Thanks for watching! In the previous video, you've tried out some advanced use case with interchange. Today, to conclude our adventure with media elements, I want to introduce you to lightboxes. All the photo galleries done up till now rely on thumbnails which link to the original image. However, the normal behavior when clicking over them will just be to redirect to the image file. Then, if you want to go back to the gallery, you have to click on the back button of your browser. This is not how the end user is used to interact with galleries. Nowadays, we are used to clicking on a thumbnail to make that image full screen and then having some simple way to close it and get back to the whole gallery. This behavior is called lightbox. As Foundation comes with batteries included, we can use the clearing plugin to make lightbox galleries from normal unordered list without any effort. To try it out, you will make the landscape grid gallery a working lightbox gallery. As usual, having to deal with JavaScript plugins will in some ways break our semantic HTML, since specific classes and data attributes are often needed to make the plugin work. No exception here, and to make a lightbox gallery with clearing, all we need to do is to assign the clearing thumbs class and the data clearing attribute to the unordered list. Actually, there is a compatibility issue between clearing and block grids. It will probably be corrected in the near future. However, if you encounter some layout problem, you may try this small fix. Now, if you save and refresh, you will enjoy a perfectly working lightbox gallery. There are much more ways to showcase images on a website. Just to name a few, there are slideshows, masonry layout, full-screen galleries, and so on. We have a slideshow plugin in Foundation as well. However, it is now deprecated. In fact, the point is that Foundation should remain a front-end framework, and at its core there must be a solid SaaS library. The panorama of JavaScript plugins is huge, and you will have no problem finding adequate solutions for your necessities. In this video, you grasped how to make any galleries of images wrapped in an ordered list a perfectly working lightbox gallery. In the next section, you will learn how to build wonderful looking forms and make the user interaction as pleasant as possible, using Foundation styles. Welcome back everybody. From the last section, you've just learned how to deal with media elements and galleries. In this section, we'll see how to interact with the user. Namely, you will learn to create forms and other input elements using the tools provided by Zurb Foundation. In this video, we are going to make a simple HTML form, and you will see that with no effort, Foundation will make it responsive and nice looking. We are now going to create our contact form on the contact page you have already created. As you guessed, the first step is to remove the placeholder image on the Contact Us tab. Here we are going to put our form. We'll just provide 3 fields for email, type of message, message text, and a standard submit button. We'll do our best to keep the form as semantic as possible. Then, as you're already used to, we are going to make it responsive using Sass. The only real difference from a plain HTML form here is that we assign the button class to the submit input. That way, your send button will be styled according to Foundation standards. And now the funny part. Let's make it responsive. Open your style file and add the proper rules. We want everything to span to 12 columns on mobile, and while on medium and larger screens, we will make the mail and type appear on the same line. Today, while creating our contact form, we just reviewed the basics of HTML form creation and enjoyed the nice Foundation default style. In the next video, you are going to get your hands dirty with some useful tools included with Foundation to personalize the forms. Hi there! In the previous video, you have created a basic contact form with nothing more than a plain HTML. Often it will be all that you need. Sometimes, however, you may want to make a little personalization of your forms, like a fancier label and buttons layout, or using a field set to divide different sections of the same form. Today, you will enhance the appearance of your contact form using some classes provided by Foundation. To get started, let's try to wrap our form in a field set and add the legend element. This is just plain HTML and Foundation will only make it look nice. Using prefix and postfix mixins, we can group some tags and make them look like a single element. We are now going to try out this feature, making a label to be attached to the email and type field. You need to assign some semantic classes to each component, so that you will then be able to tweak them using Sass. Note that now we are using span elements to represent the labels. You now have to edit the style file to make the labels look like prefix and postfix. Note that we have to include the prefix-postfix base mixin to make it work. Prefix and postfix alone won't work as expected. So, your contact form is ready. Now the labels are attached to the inputs and everything is wrapped in a nice frame. Today we have discovered some handy tools to make our form stand out using Foundation-specific classes. On Foundation, however, there are other tools to deal with user input. In the next video, we are going to talk about switches and ranges. Thanks for watching. Welcome back everybody. In our last video, we learned to personalize forms using pre- and postfixes, labels and field sets. Today, we are going to introduce switches and ranges, the former being a new way to present standard HTML inputs, and the latter being a whole new kind of input that relies on Foundation's JavaScript to work. Switches, essentially, are checkboxes and radio buttons that look like switches. This way, their appearance will be way more pleasant than default HTML, while they will still work as normal form elements. Ranges substantially allow the user to choose a number from a range by moving a slider. The input will then be available to you to be used on your JavaScript. Your contact form is already complete, and in this kind of website, you will rarely need these advanced form elements. However, for didactic's sake, we are going to observe a small survey just below the contact form. To get started, we'll just ask the user if he likes our website. To get the trick to work, we have to define a radio or a checkbox and its related label separately. Then wrap everything inside a div that we are then going to style using Sass. The only thing we really have to do is include the switch mixin. This way, Foundation will tweak the CSS of the label element and will make the checkboxes look like buttons. Range sliders are a bit trickier to set up, and being JavaScript based, it would be really hard to write them in a real semantic way. However, they could be really engaging for the final user when he has to input some numeric value comprised in some range. Why don't we ask our visitor how much would he pay for a photo shooting? Basically, we need a range slider div where we need to define some JavaScript attributes. Namely, we have to include the data slider attribute. Then, with the data options attribute, we can specify some useful options. In this case, we are defining the display selector in order to let the number appear on the designated div. We are also defining a start and an end number to enclose range within. If you save and reload, you can play a bit dragging the slider handle. In this video, you've added switches and range sliders to your toolbox. While they may be uncommon on regular websites, they will be really effective when designing the user interface for a modern web app. In the next video, we are going to talk about form validation. It sounds boring, but with Foundation's help, I promise that it will be interesting. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody. In the last video, we played with some custom form elements, such as switches and range sliders. In this video, I want to show you how to perform some really useful data validation on the form inputs and how to gracefully show pertinent error messages in case of invalid data. Foundation ships with a really nice library to deal with form validation called Abide. Using Abide, we won't have to write a single line of JavaScript to validate our form, and the result will be a professional-looking, real-time error-checking website. To get used to it, we are now going to integrate Abide validation with our contact form. The most obvious thing we can do is to check if the email is valid and specify that an email and a message are strictly required to send the form. The first thing to do is to enable Abide for your form. Just add the data abide attribute to your root form tag. You can mark with the required attribute the necessary input tags. Now, for Abide to work correctly, you have to create an element with the error class to be shown when the input is not valid. Here we are going to define some basic error messages for our contact form. If you now try to fill the form with the invalid data, you will immediately see the error message appear right below the input field. In our simple case, we didn't have to define a particular pattern to be checked. In fact, the email input type is automatically checked for correct email address by Abide. However, you can perform any kind of validation specifying a pattern attribute. Foundation ships with some default pattern to be used, such as date, email, URL, number, and much more. However, you can also define a custom pattern using a regular expression. Today, you grasped the basics of the Abide form validation library. It's always really important to perform a proper validation, as malformed data could lead to program errors and also create security problems for your applications. In the next section, we'll discover some other tools to create stunning user interfaces using Zurb Foundation. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody. In the last section, you've learned how to make some nice and usable forms and how to validate the user input. In this section, we'll discuss some other elements of the user interface to help you realize a more engaging website and to provide you some tools to help design desktop-like applications. In this video, you will discover how many things you can do with simple buttons. Firstly, let's play a bit with the Send button on your contact form. Foundation provides us with some classes to modify the appearance of simple buttons. There are tiny, small, and large for fixed dimension, or expanded that will make the button to span over the entire width of the containing object. Let's try to make our Send button expanded. As you may have guessed, you just need to add the expand class to your input element. Now, if you save and reload, you will have a full width button. This is particularly useful when designing mobile first, as we have small spaces available and we must create buttons that are easy to touch for any finger size. If we want something curvy, we can use the round class, or radius, just to smooth out a bit of the edges. If you are not using a lot of rounded element in your design, you may prefer to use radius. Let's try it on your button. Quite pleasant, isn't it? Clearly, if you are going to use some kind of button repeatedly, you'd better make a class for it and use the SAS button mixin to fine-tune it, or just extend one of the previous classes for default settings. Sometimes buttons are related or connected to each other, and we may want to keep them together in a button group. Let's make a simple navigation for your About page to try it out. Just start with a simple unordered list at the beginning of the main section. Note that we have assigned the About and Menu classes. Now let's do the magic with SAS. You have to include the button group container mixin on the root element. Then you need to select all the child list items and include the button group style mixin. Here we are also specifying that we are going to evenly space 3 buttons. Finally, the anchor elements inside the list items will be the real buttons, so you have to include the button mixin. Here we are also defining it to be full width to make it spread on all the available space. Now save and refresh and enjoy your new fancy navigation bar. In this video, you grasped how to personalize buttons and button groups using Foundation. They are everywhere and particularly important when designing for mobile, as they are usually bigger than simple links and might resemble native interfaces. For these reasons, it is particularly useful to have such powerful options at our disposal. In the next video, we'll see how to use panels and alerts. See you soon! Hi there! In the previous video, you've turned into a buttons master. In this video, you will learn to use panels and alerts to make some messages stand out or to be sure that the user will read some kind of information. Panels are essentially boxes for your text. You can use them to point something important. Let's go back to our service page and create a panel to point out a super deal. Every 4 weddings, a funeral will be free. Remove the placeholder image in the wedding section. Then simply add a div element with the class deal. Inside your deal box, you can add all your promotional content. Now, on the style file, you have to make the deal class behave as a panel. You only need to include the panel mixin. Let's get a look at the result. By default, a panel is just a gray box. However, using the options provided by the panel mixin, we can make it fancier. Let's make it orange. Try various colors by yourself and see what happens if you choose a dark one like black. Alerts are similar to panels, but are interactive and may be closed by the user. They are perceived as a notification and usually they display outside the real page design, often on the top of the page to point out some actions to be done. You can use an alert box to immediately ask the user to check for wedding deals as soon as he opens the web page. To do so, let's create an alert at the beginning of our services container. Basically, it is a simple div element where you have to define the data alert attribute and the alert box class. Assigning the info class, we get a light blue background. Other available default styles are named Success, Warning, Alert, and Secondary. Finally, you have to create the Close button, having the Close class. Now, every time you load the services page, an alert will appear on top, and when closed, it will disappear, restoring the original aspect of the page. Today, we used panels and alerts to enhance our abilities to communicate with the final user. Panels will attract the eyes of the viewer to some important message. Alerts, instead, will be perceived as a direct advice and usually are associated with some actions to be performed by the user. In the next video, you will use tooltips to give some hints to your users when they need some help. Thanks for watching. In the last video, we used panels and alerts to better communicate with the end user. In this video, you are going to learn how to use tooltips to give some immediate help and clarification. Tooltips are simply informative text which appear if you hover or touch over an element. They are quite intuitive for the end user, as we are used to a similar behavior on desktop applications. Why not use tooltips to embed some compilation instructions on your contact form? The syntax itself is not that semantic, as it strongly relies on JavaScript. However, you will see that it's not that difficult. Open your contacts page with your editor. Tooltips are meant to be applied to text elements, so we are going to use the span elements containing forms labels. You simply need to set some extra attributes to your elements, namely data attribute, area has pop-up set to true, include the hasType class, and finally a title attribute which will contain the actual text of the tooltip. Eventually, you may also include some additional classes such as typeleft, typetop, and typeright to change the default tooltip's position, or, as usual, round or radius to make it curvy. Now, you can use tooltips every time you want to give some hints to your users. They look familiar and unobtrusive, so they can be a really good solution to provide some documentation without bloating the page. In the next video, we will take a look at the modal windows. Thanks for watching. Hi there, everybody. In the previous video, you've learned how to use tooltips to show up some help messages on mouse over or touching things. In this video, we'll discover modal windows. They basically resemble desktop pop-up windows and will force the user to give them proper attention, as the user will have to close them to continue surfing the website. You will now create a credits tab in the contact page, but when clicking on it, a modal will appear. Firstly, just create another tab in your contacts navigation. You can attach a modal to every link, as long as you define a data reveal ID attribute. There, you must specify the ID of the actual modal window to be shown. Right below, let's create the window itself. Essentially, it is just a div having a data reveal attribute and the reveal modal class. Note that the ID is the same that we have specified in the data reveal ID. You can put whatever you like inside the modal. The only particular thing here is the close button, just a multiplication sign having the close reveal modal class. Eventually, you may also add a class to change the modal size and, if needed, load some asynchronous content. There are no strict rules on where in the code you have to put your modals. However, my advice is to group them together and just keep them isolated from the rest of the layout. A lot of people likes to put them at the end of the file, just before your script tags. Today, you've tried out modal windows. Be careful not to overuse them, as they could be annoying to the user. However, they will fit perfectly on web applications that have to mimic some desktop dynamics, and also on regular websites. They are great to keep ugly and secondary text out of the actual layout and available only on explicit request. In the next video, we'll see how to create breadcrumbs and pagination, as they could be useful on blogs and websites with complex structure. See you soon! Welcome back. In the previous video, we used models to create nice pop-up windows on our website. In this video, you'll learn to create nice-looking breadcrumbs and pagination. To be honest, they are slowly disappearing in favor of more modern approaches such as simpler navigation and infinite scrolling. However, they are still useful tools to know for various reasons. Search engine optimization for asynchronous loaded content is not yet so perfect, and this could penalize infinitely scrollable content. Blogs and a lot of content management system themes use pagination and breadcrumbs, and being able to let them look nice using Foundation is still a valuable point to me. Let's try to add a breadcrumb on top of our About page. Nothing easier, it's just a nav element having the breadcrumbs class. Here we're including only home and about, because usually breadcrumbs are used to point out the path from the home page of a website to the actual page, allowing you to easily reach different nesting levels. I'm not going to use SAS here, as breadcrumbs sound semantic enough. However, in case of needs, you can also use the crumb container mixin for the nav and the crumbs one for the links. I guess one page is more than enough for the About page. However, for didactic purposes, let's add a fake pagination at the end, just to get to know its syntax. Basically, you just need to create an unordered list with links to page numbers. Classes to remember here are pagination for the main container, unavailable for non-clickable elements, arrow for next and previous page arrows, and as usual, current to point out the current page. Please also note the HTML code for left and right arrow buttons and the 3 dots. Obviously, you may also use whatever symbols you like as well. There's only a small quirk to remember. If you want to center your pagination, you should use a container div, which has the pagination centered class. Here it is our nice pagination. In this video, you've learned to create a nice looking breadcrumbs and pagination. I don't know for how long would we still need them, but probably there will always be some use case in which they'll be needed. This section concludes our exploration of Foundation components. I hope you have enjoyed what you learned so far, and that you will be able to use these new skills on some great real-world projects. The next section will be just a bit more theoretical, and we'll draw our conclusions. We'll see how we can change SAS variables to completely change the look and feel of Foundation's default theme. We'll also see some useful resources available online for our projects and some best practices to ship our projects to the real world. Thanks for watching and hope you've enjoyed this course so far. Welcome back. In the last section, we spent some time trying different user interface elements that may be useful in a lot of situations. Here we are now at the last section of this video course on building a responsive site with Zurb Foundation. You have learned about all the major features and tools available on Foundation, with the help of which you have created a nice prototype for a photography website. Real world, however, is quite different from prototypes. In this section, I'd like to give you some hints on how to move from design to production, as well as suggesting some useful resources that may help working with Foundation. Then, finally, try to more widely argument on where to go next. Today, I'd like to show you the real power of SAS variables to customize every aspect of the look and feel of Foundation in order to be able to create custom themes. In fact, without a proper customization, all the website will look quite similar with the default Foundation theme. While this may be acceptable when mocking up, it surely won't fit well in production. If you give a look to the settings file in your SCSS directory, you will find a huge amount of commented lines. Those are the default values for about every aspect of the look and feel of Foundation theme. If you really want to personalize your website, sooner or later you will end up editing those SAS variables. In fact, before trying to implement some custom style rules, you should check if the same effect may be achieved editing the settings file, as it will probably be a safer approach. Now, just to get our hands dirty, let's try to mess up some variables. Just change some colors and fonts to give it a try. As you can see, the document is divided in sections, and all the variables' names are quite self-explanatory. This way, all the editing is as simple as just changing some values, and we do not have to deal with complicated CSS selectors. Now, as you save the file, Grunt will compile it and your website will immediately reflect your changes. Today, you've discovered how to customize the Foundation look and feel thanks to the powerful SAS variables it kindly provides us. In the next video, we'll go a bit more theoretical to discuss how to try to optimize our websites to make them ready for a production environment. Thanks for watching. Hi there again. In the previous video, we've seen how to customize Foundation using the settings file. Today, I would like to briefly introduce some useful tools and opinionated best practices to optimize your website for deployment. You've already got in touch with Grunt. Modern web development workflow includes a lot of steps to go from the written code to the production code and assets. Fortunately, the majority of those steps could be automated by tools such as Grunt or Gulp. The major alternative to Grunt is Gulp. It does not yet have all the plugins that Grunt has, but its popularity is increasing fast due to its cleaner stream-based syntax, but also because it saves us the trouble of dealing with slow temporary files. Other interesting alternatives you may want to try are Branch and Metalsmith. On real projects, you will often find yourself dealing with dependency management. For those tasks, don't forget to give a look at Bower and NPM. In fact, you are already using Bower to manage your working Foundation version. Automating things will allow to have a perfectly optimized code without having to bother with a lot of manual steps. However, you should also have a clear idea of what are the main aspects to influence the performance on production. Surely, minifying your scripts and styles will save you a bunch of kilobytes, and compressing and removing metadata from images will also have a great impact. But there are other less intuitive things to watch for. For example, being sure that your host supports compression or using WebM images when supported. A nice trick that could really make some difference is AntCSS. Basically, when you are using big frameworks like Foundation or Bootstrap, you most probably won't need all the defined CSS rules. Using AntCSS as an automation task, you will remove all the CSS rules which are not actually used on your page. This way, you could serve way smaller style files and have faster download and rendering time. In this video, we spoke about some nifty ways to simplify the transaction from prototype to real code. In the next video, we'll see some nice resources to quick start your project with Foundation. See you soon! Welcome back! In the previous video, you've learned some basic approaches to optimize your code and make it ready for production. In this video, I'd like to show you some resources freely available online, with the help of which you can often have a way quicker start for your projects. Having a framework like Foundation at your disposal will hugely reduce the scaffolding and developing time in a lot of situations. However, also using a framework, you will soon end up repeating yourself on common tasks. Many times, for example, you may need a blog page or a social feed, or maybe a grid of products. For these reasons, Zurb kindly provides us some templates for such common situations. Those are simple mockups ready to be integrated on your projects through a simple copy and paste. However, be careful and try to use them as a starting point so that they won't break your naming conventions on an active project. In fact, they are not very semantic, nor optimized to be used with SaaS. You will probably end up tweaking them a bit, but they could save you some time when trying to create the visual structure. There's another little gem by Zurb that I'd like to show you, Pattern Top. It's still quite an experiment, but it's already useful. Essentially, it is a collection of user-contributed block of codes ready to be copied and integrated on your projects. There are a lot of user interface elements, complete widgets or page structures that you can use to speed up your work. The nice thing is that when you select a code block to use, you will be presented with all the HTML, JavaScript and CSS to use, and you can also choose to have SCSS code instead of plain CSS. On Zurb Playground, you will find a lot of experimentation related to Foundation or general web design. So remember to check their website on a regular basis. In this video, you've delved in some useful resources to be productive with Foundation. You've also checked some aspects of the hype and environment that Zurb is building around their main product. I hope you will find all of this quite useful in your work. In the next video, we'll try to quickly recap about what have you learned with this course, but also what you have not. See you soon! Welcome back. In the previous video, I showed you some resources to get things done faster using Foundation. We are coming at the end of this video course, and today I would like to recap both what you have learned, but also the limits of a framework like this. I'd also like you to have perfectly clear where does it lay the fat line between prototype and real world. For that sake, I'd like to show you some websites made with Foundation, so that we can try to identify the elements and the techniques used that we know about, but also to understand where and how some customization are coming to play. On Zurb Responsive Library, you will find a lot of real-world websites cataloged by the framework used and by some features or characteristics they have. This is really an awesome resource when you need some inspiration for responsive design. But it is also a great place to try to figure out how web developers all around the world are using and integrating the different Foundation features. Let's take a look at the HTC Store page. Using the inspector, you can easily identify the various row elements. On top, we have the header, then a big 12 columns elements for promotional usage. Then we have a grid of elements, realize setting the single box to be 4 columns wide on large and 6 on medium. So there will be 3 elements per row on large and 2 on medium. Swatch.com is another interesting website. You can easily recognize the big 12 columns slider. Then we have a grid as well, but this time it is realized using a block grid. Looking at class names, we can find out that it will have 3 elements on medium and 2 elements on small, and as a block grid, they will always be evenly spaced. Today, we've seen how flexible Foundation could be in the real world, but you should also have now clear the importance to be able to adapt the framework to your needs and not let the framework change them. Browsing those real-world examples, you won't find 2 websites that looks too similar. Once correctly customized, Foundation doesn't look anymore like a prototype and will perfectly adapt to your needs. The next video will be the last. I know you will miss me. However, we'll try to understand where to go from here, what you should learn beside a framework to be productive, and what is available today as a developing and deploying tools for modern web design. Thanks again for watching. Hi there everybody. In the previous video, we browsed some real-world usage examples of Zurb Foundation. This video is going to be the last video of this course, so we are going to recap our journey and try to widely understand where the market is moving and how to integrate Foundation with the ever-changing technologies out there. You now should have grasped all the core aspects of the Foundation framework and be able to realize quick working prototypes as well as adapt those prototypes to some kind of real-world scenarios. Being a CSS and JavaScript framework, it is a really simple task to use it on a static website, just as simple as including the correct file or generating the whole thing with some task runner or one of the existing static site generator, such as Jekyll or Middleman. Those are basically tools that allow you to code using preprocessors, templating engines, and a well-organized directory structure, and then being able to compile everything to some minified and concatenated assets ready to be served. While static websites are great for small projects, they won't easily fit on more complicated requirements and probably will be hard to manage for non-technical people. So, you will probably end up needing a commonly used content management system such as WordPress, Drupal or Joomla, or maybe code your own with whatever technology you like. Commonly used CMS usually have quite simple templating systems, and there are a lot of themes based on Foundation available for all of them. Integration with a custom solution will be quite simple as well. The only thing you may consider when choosing what technology to use is good support for Sass compilation. As Sass was born as a Ruby gem and Foundation itself is distributed that way, the more natural choice to realize a big project with Foundation should be to use Ruby on Rails. However, thanks to libsass, a C implementation of Sass, you can quickly compile your SCSS file on every major environment, like Node, Python, or Java as well. Clearly, if you renounce to the Sass support and rely on pure CSS version of Foundation, it will then be absolutely language agnostic, but I think that won't be a good idea to sacrifice the precompiler, or at least I'd consider the idea only to integrate it with common PHP content management systems such as WordPress or Joomla. Well, here we are. Our journey with Foundation is coming to an end. I hope you enjoyed it and that you have learned a lot about Foundation. All the code realized during the course will be available on my GitHub page. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching this video course and happy hacking with Foundation.